Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So one of my big concerns was that I go to school pretty far, and I don't really have any family that lives like closer to my school. So when we first closed down, or they were thinking about closing down, my city, well, Boston was closing down first. They didn't really think about closing us first, like closing New Orleans down. So I was still kind of stuck here. And one of my main concerns was that I was going to come back to school and the same situation was going to happen, and my school wasn't going to be prepared for that certain incident. Another concern was my education as well. Um, I'm a STEM major, so a lot of times I'm in the lab doing a lot of classes on the lab. So doing classes online isn't the best situation, especially when you're like trying to understand certain concepts. So I thought that we were going to struggle as much as we struggled during the springtime of last spring than what we felt we were dealing with this fall. But I ended up coming back. So I think one of the things that I've overcome was, trying to figure out my best schedule and how I felt more comfortable on Zoom, but also figuring out my own like student style of learning. So I do more of a hybrid learning. So I do all my STEM classes in person, and then I do all the other classes, like my free electives online, so that I'm not putting myself at exposure as much as if I was a full-time on campus student.
I can go next. So a big issue and like worry that I had, especially for my major, you need to be in person and like interactive with people and students. And I'm a theater and performance major, and I was scared of how that would look like at Emerson. And we're in person now, this semester and last semester. But I was scared as to how that was going to be like, and if I was going to be able to get like the full experience that I would have gotten if I was a college student, a freshman last year. And yeah, I think that was just my biggest concern overall.
I can go next. I also go to a school. I live in Boston and go to school in Chicago. And my biggest fear was, specifically because my school was in the South Side, was that if I was contributing to the further spread of COVID, being that going to college is a privilege, and the South Side of Chicago is a neighborhood, or is a part of the city that is at higher risk for getting COVID. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't contributing to the problem. So that was a big fear that I'd had going to college. But once I got to the university handled it pretty well and created a bubble around our campus where we had a less than 0.1% infection rate. And so they really locked down, were really strict and about anyone breaking protocol. So that was a big fear of going to school in Chicago. Another fear that I had was, I'm also a neuroscience and pre-med student, so I'm also STEM, and I'm a very hands-on learner. And so I felt that I was going to miss out on a bit of comprehension, because my style of learning is not sitting in front of a computer. It's touching and feeling and writing on the board and things such as that. So that was a big obstacle that I'm still trying to work through. But I think with everything, like the more you do it, the more acquainted you get to it. So I think over time I'll get used to it.
Teoria.
Okay, I can. So my experience is a lot different because I was a graduate student during the time that COVID hit. So I'm not living on campus and I'm also local. I think one of the biggest concerns for me is really just like losing out on my experience because I was in a education program, so it's full-time 1 year, but I did mine a little bit slower. So for me, it was difficult because we didn't have the in-person interactions. Everything pretty much moved immediately online. And then for the fall, it was all online. But I think it really took away like one of the biggest things about being in grad school, which was being able to network with, future educators or policymakers or what have you. So I think one of the biggest struggles was, one of the biggest concerns was basically just not having that experience. Even for our graduation, they just announced that we're going to have it in person, but only graduates can come. So it really just, it takes away from it. But for me, I'm kind of okay with it too, because I already went through undergrad. I feel like it would be a little bit different if I didn't already have a graduation, but it was definitely tough. But I think that being able to keep myself safe as a high risk person, keep my family safe, I think that that's what's most important. So, yeah.
Dustin kind of touched on this a little bit, but how has this remote hybrid learning changed your overall college experience? And what would you identify as some of the pros of it, but also identifying the cons?
I can jump in because it kind of just touched on what I was talking about. So I think that like building those relationship and connections with your classmates, that part's difficult. One of the other things that's difficult is the accessibility to the professors. Like they're available, but I'm one of those people that like to go after class and just touch base with the professor really quickly, ask any questions. So that part is kind of hard. I feel like the connections it's just harder to make the connections. But one of the pros is that obviously you save time on like a commute, if that is what you're doing, even if it's just like walking from like building to building, you can save time on a commute. One of the other things that's terrible is that you still have to pay the same amount of money. I know that the cash is going to like other things such as technology, but it still costs a lot even during the pandemic, and a lot of the financial situations changed as well.
I can add a little bit more to what I was saying. I think that one of the biggest pros is that, I don't know, I feel like specifically in like Socratic seminar style classes or like discussion based classes, I feel like people are a little bit more willing to share because they're at home, they're in the comfort of their own home than like in regular person, which has been strange because I felt like if we're all on Zoom, like people will like just be quiet and like is really less like you feel less pressure to talk. But surprisingly, people have been willing to speak more and say some a little bit more provocative or like opinionated things because they have the protection of their screen, which has like led to interesting discussions. But you know, it's also like added to more complicated and complex discussions, which is a positive and a negative. Another negative that I've seen is specifically in my STEM classes is that the comprehension is really just decreased because you can't sit there and talk to your professor after class, or your TA, or like now, for example, at Chicago, we have our general chemistry class is taught by 2 professors with 500 students in it, which is never the case at our university before now. But they said there's no point of having 25 different professors to teach the same course when it's going to be asynchronous. And so even to reach out to the professor to ask, hey, can I get a clarifying point? You got to wait for 499 people to get through their emails. So there's like difficulties there with like making classes bigger because they have the Zoom space to do it. So that's a con of working virtually.
I can go next. Something that I personally experienced as a negative is that Zoom has made me lazy in a way. It's made me feel as though like I feel like because I'm so comfortable now with Zoom, there'll be times where I get distracted easily on Zoom and I'm not fully focused in what I'm learning or what is being taught to me. And I feel like if I were in person, I'd be able to absorb information easier and I'm just better. And also, especially like I was saying, with my major, you have to be interactive, next to each other. And it's hard at the fact that we have to be 6 feet apart all the time. And it's like hard to hear. And it's just it's also very draining, especially for me. And I know a lot of my peers feel the same way. It just made this overall first semester was really hard, and second semester it's better I guess for some students here at Emerson, but it's still a challenge. And I know some of my teachers are still trying to adapt to this whole COVID teaching process. And like we have classes in person and in online, like if they alternate during which week. But those are just the two cons here at Emerson and what I've experienced.
One of my cons is I can also agree with Beyonce is that, you know, you get tired of being on Zoom. So you start getting lazy because it's such a convenience because, you know, before you had to go to class, you had like, for me, you have to swipe in for attendance. But now, like, cause you have like Zoom in place, you can kind of like have Zoom on your computer, but like you can literally just walk away from it. And I think that also teachers have gotten lazy on a certain extent because they're like, oh, well, it's on Zoom. So like, you know, they're not putting their best effort into teaching us. But then you have like, you know, how some of your teachers are in person where they're kind of like giving their all, and they're also saying, you know, they suggest that you can go online for the classes too. But then students find that as an excuse to not even go to class because you can just go in class in Zoom. So I just see that, you know, that's a con in general. And I think that was a con when we first implicated it before, like when COVID first started, and still to this day.
I realize I'm muted. Thank you all for sharing that. I appreciate that. So what are some things you have all felt like you struggled with this year that you felt you needed support with that wasn't necessarily there?
I can actually go because recently, like this week, I've been struggling with, you know, my like course load and also not having the support system of my school. So like I had also like really had been considering like, is my school the best place for me? Because, you know, I have an advisor, but she's not really advising me on the best solution or best plan to continue my education where it needs to be. And then you also have, you know, your professors who are not as, you know, supportive either. And so I think a lot of times, you know, I've realized COVID has affected our social aspect on campus, our social aspect with our professors and our advisors, that, you know, we're struggling to be motivated to even continue our education or even continue what we are doing, like, you know, our major in general. So that's what I've been struggling with.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, in my school specifically, communication with teachers and professors has been very hard. And I feel like you try to be understanding because of COVID, but it like if there's no teacher support and like motivation, then I feel like there's no motivation on the students' ends either. So and I also have an academic advisor who's not helpful at all. So I've like been having to find myself like go back to my mentors or like teachers from my high schools or like any other person that I consider a mentor in my life to help me. And it's sad because I know I have these resources at school, but they're not being enforced or helping me in the college process. And especially since that my mentors or any teacher at school doesn't go to my school, so they can't help me in certain ways that my academic advisors are supposed to but aren't.
Can jump in as well. For me, I think that just in general, like being able to find mentorship, like you said, especially as a person of color in graduate school, I think it was a lot harder than even doing my undergraduate degree. You know, there's less people of color who go to graduate school than undergrad. And so being able to find those resources and tap in, like I got to the point, I literally told my advisor, I was like, listen, I'm not going to school past 2020. Like if I don't finish this class, like I'm done. And he kind of laughed and I'm just like, no, I'm serious, Stacey. And I'm like, it was really tough. And I got to the point where I was just like, I don't even know if I'm going to finish this degree. And I was literally one class away from doing it. So, then you add in COVID to that and just like really just trying to figure out like a good like work, school, life, family balance. It's all just a mess. And, you know, it's a little bit harder in graduate school as well because like at that point, they really just think that you're an adult that knows everything. And I'll say in a second, I don't. So it was really just challenging to find the support, to find the mentorship, to find even just like a little bit of compassion sometimes. So it definitely was a struggle, but I am happy that I'm done.
I can go. I have one that's more like specific to my school, in that before I came to school, I didn't realize that different schools have different teaching styles. That they just kind of like all taught the same stuff, harder or easier. But I didn't realize that East Chicago is way more theory based than practical based. So like if we learn math, we're learning theoretical calculus, not practical calculus that you would use to like solve for like something in real life. And so I didn't realize that, and I didn't have any theoretical anything based in high school. So it was a little bit of a learning curve coming into school with kids who had gone to Exeter or Harvard Westlake or Buckingham Nickel and Brown had these theory based everything classes, Hume, science, STEM, everything was theory based. And so that was one of the biggest obstacles that I had to deal with, like with the learning style of my school as a whole. Something else was like, being that we're remote, I didn't have like the opportunity to like talk to a friend and be like, hey, I'm struggling with an essay. Oh, why don't you go to the writing tutors? Well, I don't know what writing tutors are. I don't have the opportunity to talk to people, or go to the chem tutors, or go to these tutors, or these tutors, or these tutors exist. You just have to find them. Well, I didn't know these tutors exist. I thought there was just my TA and my professor. I didn't know that there was all these other opportunities or resources that the school pays for that are waiting to be used. So that was a biggest thing, was navigating different opportunities, scholarship, funding opportunities, especially with COVID. There have been like a lot more funding opportunities, like the CARES Act. Almost missed the CARES Act opportunity, which if you guys are in school, I don't know if you guys, what age group, but if you are in school, CARES Act is lots of money that you can literally just get for just existing. So it's a really good opportunity if you do have the opportunity to take advantage of it.
So tying into that in particular, we wanted to address the financial needs that you may have experienced as a relation to COVID. And what support do you feel you need from student financial services within your universities?
I can start again. So there's really no funding for graduate school. So that's how I said I'll start, because there's really not much to it. You can take out loans. The school will be you, especially they're not generous at all. Thankfully, I have some tuition reimbursement through my employer. But other than that, like there was some costs that I had to cover out of pocket. So yeah, there really isn't. And it just made it difficult because I moved in the midst of COVID as well. So it was terrible.
So for me, I was going into college during COVID when it first sparked up, and I like had to fight my school to give me money. Like all the schools that I got accepted to, I had to fight them to give me money, and my school isn't usually generous with money. They give you'll get in a lot of debt because the school is very expensive. But it's just the fact that for me, I had to fight so hard just to get financial aid in the end. And it shouldn't be like that, especially with everyone knowing the impacts that COVID had on people's lives. Like, for example, my mom works at Wentworth University in the cafeteria. So when they shut down and closed, she didn't have a job. And that was for months on end. And I can't afford this $70,000 school. So it's just the fact that I shouldn't have to struggle that much just to get money in the end. And I'm grateful for the money that they gave me in the end, and that I'm grateful that I'm at this school. But it was really ridiculous.
I can go. So I go to a HBCU, so a lot of funding, a lot of financial aid isn't really given, especially because of where I go to school, what type of college it is. But I do have an academic scholarship, and they give, a good amount of money, and I have a good amount of financial aid. But one of the issues was, the rapid change to go back home tickets are not cheap, especially when I live so far. So when, we got back home, maybe 2 months in, they said, you guys can apply for this extra funding or this emergency grant fund where you can get extra money. And then they also said it this year that we can do the same. So I've applied for those things, but it's not always guaranteed that you're going to get that money. But when you're trying to get extra money throughout the semester, if they're not offering it, it's really hard to even get a contact into from our financial aid office, or they'll say we don't have extra money to give. But you're wondering well, we just got this amount of money donated to the school, where's this going to? So that's one of my main issues, and some of other students' main issues is we see we're getting money, but where is it really going to us? Especially when it's coming to our education, and that we're kind of struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, similarly, it's the inverse costs of COVID that have been the killer for me. Thankfully, I had a scholarship for university, but being that I'm so far, tickets are not cheap. Disinfectant wipes are not cheap. Living in a space where you're usually there for maybe 10 to 12 hours usually, but now you're there 24 hours, keeping the lights on, the water, food. These are all costs that have now increased because of COVID. And so there has been, I would say, more at my university, there has been more exceptions to costs than actual them giving money. So for example, housing was cut drastically. They didn't give us any money back, but we had to pay less. Or they increased our tuition. Instead of it was supposed to increase 2.1%, they increased it 1.5%. Still don't know why we're increasing. Don't understand why we're increasing. We're the most expensive school in the country. What more money do you need? But there have been small little things. I think small community-based organizations that are helping minority students of color or minority students have been the resources that I've been taking advantage of that are really hidden, or the universities don't talk about. So little organizations that are supporting women of color who are in college and during COVID, and small grants like the CARES Act, which is a government funded initiative that can cover that will give you up to $7,000 because of the impacts of COVID, just because you were impacted by COVID. So there are little things that are hidden that I had to really dig for, that are there. But I guess if I have to search for them, I guess they're not really that accessible for everyone. So that's another issue with the accessibility of the funds that are available.
Okay, that was very insightful. All right, kind of switching gears, but in the same vein of COVID, I'm curious to know, what have you all saw within your personal community, that can be within your student status, your ethnicity and culture during COVID, that has either concerned you, made you happy, or both?
Could you say that one more time?
Sure. So what have you saw within your personal community, for example, whether it's in your current student status, your ethnicity or culture, home community during COVID, that has either concerned you, made you happy, or had a combination of the two?
I can go. Okay, well, one thing that I'm proud of with my college, my university's community, is that how much we all are wearing our mask on campus, and how much they're enforcing, you need to get your COVID test. If you don't get a COVID test, you can get fined for not taking one. So they initially, we didn't have a lab on campus our first semester in the fall, but this semester they got a lab, so we all have to get tested every 3 weeks. So they're always like kind of on our backs about being safe and, putting things in line. But one thing that does scare me is that, outside of our campus bubble, that's not the same, atmosphere, I'm in an area like New Orleans where, masks aren't really like a big thing. So you see people walking around without them or going into stores without them and not caring. So the spread is wider outside, in the outer skirts. But when you're on campus, people are covered up. But it's like when you're out of campus, you're in the other communities, like, what are you doing? And you can see like some of my fellow friends are going out, going to parties and this and that. And that's what I'm not proud of, is like, if you want this to end, then you need to make a change.
Yeah, something for me that I'm also proud of, going off of Michaela, is my school's enforcement of being safe with COVID. My school, we have to get tested twice a week. We have to do something called a symptom tracker on our phones before we enter the building. We have to show it to security guards. That's also linked to our IDs. And the classrooms are spread out 6 feet apart, and that really makes me feel better about going to school during COVID. And something that's made me upset is like the rise in Asian hate. I'm pretty sure that we've seen all over social media. And it's very prominent also in my school. I have heard and saw people say very racist and disrespectful things towards the Asian students in my school. And there have been times where I've had to like step in and stand up for someone who a person who is Asian who doesn't feel comfortable standing up for themselves, or just also have to report to the school. And it's just like it's a continuous loop of hate towards groups of people. And in my school, that's a predominantly white institution. It's very, sometimes it feels like not a safe community at this school. And the thing that makes me upset is that my school promotes diversity and inclusion and welcoming all kinds of people, but doesn't practice it, and the student body doesn't embody that.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo off everything, because my school's discipline for students who are on campus has been really well. And like I said before, being that our school, a very white rich institution, is in a gentrifying the south side of Chicago, my biggest fear was that we as a university were going to contribute to further spread within this at-risk community. And they have really tried to nip that in the bud as much as possible and lower rates as much as possible and provide testing every week. And another thing that they did was that most of our service workers on the university are unfortunately people of color and Black people. And they ensured that all of those people were vaccinated first, and then they went to everyone else, because service workers are the ones who are most at risk to contract COVID from work. And so that was one positive thing that the university did to make sure that those high risk people were taken care of. Something that I'm very sad about is that because our university doesn't recognize fraternities and sororities, because they live still in the camp, like on campus grounds, but they own the house that they are in, they continue to have parties and whatever functions throughout COVID, and the university can't necessarily do anything because it's their private property. They own the land and they're not recognized by the university. And so they're the University of Chicago sororities and fraternities, but the University of Chicago can't do anything to stop them from having super spreader parties, which is frustrating because these are our students who are contributing to the problem. So I would like them to find a way to handle that without like intruding on people's privacy, but then also the general public is at risk.
Thank you. So this is my final question for your group. Is there any elements or topics in higher ed that you feel have not been addressed or is not receiving much notoriety that you think should be shown a spotlight?
I would say the mistreatment of Asian Americans during this time period. I don't think my school has given as much attention to not to specifically that issue, but any issue that has to do with a minority being marginalized further in any spectrum. I think my university has blinders on to those issues because it doesn't benefit them financially in any way. which is really saddening because we have a huge Asian American population within our school. 35% of our student body are Asian Americans. Our provost is an Asian American woman, and it's really sad to see, even in like positions of high positions. Although I'm sure there are like other factors within it, like that are affecting the lack of response. It's sad to see that even in high position, people of color are still almost not negating the fact that these exist, but not outwardly discussing these issues. Even though I don't expect the administration or the school to like have a solution, but address that it is an issue and recognize that it is an issue is a step. And it's really sad to see that they have really just left that to the students' own demise to make their own claims of whether they support it or not.
I agree with Dustin. In my school, especially a lot of administration and professors will like bring up the situation, ask us as students how do we feel about it, and like that will be them bringing it up and like showing that they're with Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate or any minority group that's being oppressed. And it's left to the students to talk about it and always bring it up. I know myself in class, especially when the Black Lives Matter movement was on rise, I'd always have to like, I guess, educate people, because last semester and this semester, I was the only person of color in my class, in all my classes. And so when those conversations were brought up, everyone would turn to me and ask me, well, Beyonce, how do you feel? Or Beyonce, what do you think? Even my professors. And it was very tiring and frustrating and like exhausting that because whenever I said something and towards the end, everyone would be like, I'm here for you, I see you, I feel you. And that was it. It was just it was always like I see you, I hear you, and move on with your day kind of thing. And it's always just left to the students to bring it up and just start the conversation sometimes, or just even give suggestions to white people on how to help support the movement and us as minorities and as a community.
I think for my school, besides the fact that they kind of like, they'll address any, global or economic problems, they'll like, our president will send in like a big, email saying like, oh, like we acknowledge this and that. Like my president sent me an email today, like all of us an email about what's going on with the Asian community. But that's just what they just do. They just address it so that they know that we're aware of what's going on, but that's it. But also a main issue, I think, is also, students' mental health as well. Like, how do you think we as students are impacted due to the stuff that we've been going through? And then what are you guys doing to make sure that we're okay? Because a lot of times, a lot of our students are failing classes or dropping out of these classes because we socially or mentally cannot do it because we're like stressed out or we're tired or we just don't have the motivation anymore to continue with certain things and that we're dealing with on campus.
For me, I think I've said it enough times, but just being able to support someone who is like pursuing an advanced degree, I think that being able to offer that support and really just have that space and visibility that is available, I think that's one thing that is often overlooked. Keep it short and sweet.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences. I greatly appreciate you, especially taking time out of your school schedule to be a part of this panel. And I will be in contact with you guys once this is over to also thank you again. I want to now shift the panelists in for our high school experience speakers.
John, you're on mute.
How did that happen? Everything else was heard, right? Everything else. All right. Our first student is Sean Calley. He's a student at Barnstable High School in Hyannis, Massachusetts. And we have Kyla Roberts, who is a student at Newark Tech School of Technology in Newark, New Jersey. And then we have our specialist, Cicely Shaw, who has the knowledge that we can get from not only just a general high school, but her experience in higher ed as well, and be able to kind of relate some of the concerns of high school students, but also from her perspective on the administrative side of how we can best assist students. So I would like to welcome them in now. And so you guys can cam up if you can, and make sure you unmute yourselves. So my very first question, and we'll start with Kyla and Sean. What factors are going into your college decision now as a result of COVID, and how has COVID maybe changed your college plans and the way you see things?
Okay, so for me and my family, we're really just looking at like how they're dealing with the situation, if they're being safe about it, because I'm trying to go to college in Texas and my family is still in New Jersey. So we're just trying to make sure, like, you know, I'm not traveling between states and putting anybody at risk that shouldn't be at risk.
For me, financially is probably one of the biggest aspects for the college experience that will come for the next 4 years. And also COVID has actually helped because some schools are now test optional, creating more possibilities for people who are not as strong test takers for those harder schools to get accepted into based on their extracurriculars and their grades overall.
Cicely, could you be able to speak to this of what you've been encountering with students?
Yeah, so cost obviously is a big factor. Being able to afford, you know, I always tell students it's not the acceptance that's the hardest part. It's once you get in and then you're trying to figure out if you can actually afford to go to that school. But now there are some, you know, other costs that I think families hadn't really thought about, like what we saw last year with the colleges closing down and, you know, how they were instructing students to leave campus. You know, I work with a lot of international students. So I just thought of them and, okay, if a campus is closing down, they're like, sorry, you gotta go. Where are you going? So I think some families are now thinking about creating that nest egg a little bit just in case of emergency, where I don't think they would have really thought about that before. One other piece that I'm finding that my families and the students I work with are really struggling with is they want to have the real quote unquote college experience. And they feel that with COVID, they're not going to get that. And I think also some other factors that are going into making a decision it's really hard because colleges can't really give the answer yet. So a lot of my families are like, oh, the school's going to be in person. That's really big. So I know earlier today when we were listening to the higher ed side, and it seemed like colleges like, this is a great thing. You know, we can work from home and we can do this. On the high school side, there aren't a lot of students that I work with that are really excited about that option and are a little disappointed in the fact that colleges may be hybrid in the fall. They really want colleges to be in person, obviously being safe and taking precaution and doing everything that they need to do to make sure that their students and faculty are safe. But students want to be on campus. Students want that experience. And they want to be able to, like, quote unquote, go away to college. So I'd say those are the biggest factors that I've been dealing with students. When I talk to them, they're just really nervous about what will college look like when they get to campus, if they get to campus.
For Kyle and Sean, can you speak to the challenges you have faced as a high school student, that you feel colleges should take into consideration?
So it's really like the lack of motivation, and I feel like I'm not learning as much as I would if I'm in school. Definitely the learning part, because my teachers have also been, it's showing like with my teachers that they're not really, they're starting not to really care that much. And then when they're not performing their best, then we can't either. So it's really like, I'm not learning as much as I feel like I should be. And I feel like colleges should definitely take that into consideration. But as far as everything else, though, I feel like we're doing really good. Like we've been helping each other. Well, within my school community, we've between the students, anyways, we've been like helping each other with work and trying to get each other to understand certain things. because my teachers haven't really been as helpful as they should be.
Personally, I feel that the same thing, the lack of motivation, just because the end of junior year and then senior year, there's so much, there's a big difference of learning from the junior year to senior year where they expect you to learn more during, at least for my senior year. Then in the junior year, it was just sort of overlooked. We combined the 2 semesters at the end and we didn't really learn much. And that affects you for the later classes. I know I want to go into math and engineering. So not learning sufficient material in our previous math and science classes to continue on to the senior year math and science courses is very difficult. And I feel that they should take that in consideration, especially being hands-on a lot in the classroom and not be able to have the opportunity to do that as much is very difficult.
Cicely, do you have anything to add for this particular topic and what you've become aware of that you think colleges should take into consideration now for certain incoming high school students?
Yeah, I would say, and I mean, I'm pretty sure colleges are aware because I know that they were experiencing it pre-COVID. It's just the mental health status of students. They're really coming in with a lot of trauma, and I don't know how colleges are going to be able to manage those caseloads, especially when pre-COVID that was an issue. I agree with the 2 students and just with the lack of motivation. So again, how do you rally these new students that are coming to campus and get them excited about learning in a virtual or a hybrid environment? It may feel like, oh gosh, I've been here before and I don't know if I want to do this again for college. And then again, just to reiterate what they were saying about like just educational gaps. There are some schools where students, they haven't stepped foot in their building since last March. They haven't been in their school building in a year. And everything is kind of a team effort. Okay, let me pair up with my friends and we're going to figure this assignment out, but they're not getting the support. So how will colleges vamp up their advising on campus? And I heard it from even the college students, just that their advisors weren't really as helpful as they wanted them to be. So I think colleges really need to be aware of the resources that they're pushing out to their students to make sure that they're supported once they get there.
Now back to Kyla and Sean, based off of COVID and what post-COVID may look like, what are you two thinking? How are you anticipating your first year of college to look like in an ideal world? Like, how would you like that to go for yourselves?
Of course, I feel like we're still going to be wearing masks, of course, but as far as like only doing learning online, when I go to college, I don't want to just be online. Like I want to be, especially when it comes to like meeting new people, I definitely want to be like going out and doing stuff, but that's if it's safe. Of course, if it's not safe, then I'm going to be doing what I'm doing now. But I definitely want to be, meeting new people and getting out there because it's college. Like the college, like she said before, the college experience, that's what I'm trying to have.
I feel that for like the freshman year of college, I really want to be able to be in the classroom and be able to learn hands-on a lot more than virtually, just because I'm not a virtual type of person. I like to see things done out on the board, even if it's the same thing, having like a Zoom meeting with the teacher being there and having her write on like some sort of whiteboard that's presented to the class. It's not the same feeling as in the same classroom with her where you can ask questions, be interactive. And honestly, there's just the social aspect of college itself. Like that's the college experience. You learn new people, you learn new things. You discover yourself within the communities you associate yourself with. And that's just a very huge thing of college. And that's what everybody talks about. And just being able to experience that your first year would probably be really helpful.
And Cicely, you have spoken about some of the students not liking the idea that they wouldn't have that on-campus experience. So I'm curious to know, have you had discussions with some of these students and families saying that they're going to, like if COVID is still having the same impact that it is, have you been hearing anything about people deferring further out to delay that so therefore they can get their full college experience?
Not too much deferring for that reason. I think some of my families will defer for financial reasons, or they would defer for travel. I haven't heard that yet because colleges haven't come out with their fall. There actually are some colleges that are coming out with their fall plans, but the schools that our students are getting into, they haven't heard whether or not colleges will be in person or hybrid in the fall. And I know that information will come later, but yeah, I agree with Sean and Kyla about just the social aspect. I think they had that expectation prior to COVID, and they still, believe it or not, have that expectation after COVID. They just want to be able to, if they're going away to college, to experience that town or city that the college is in, or get involved in different activities on campus, get to meet people, go to orientation and get to meet your future roommate, all the things that we did, right? And they hear the stories. I think that's still the expectation, even though they're feeling a little grim about it.
For Kyla and Sean, what have you saw within your personal community, i.e. your ethnicity and culture, or even just student status during COVID that has either concerned you, made you happy, or both? And this also extends to you too, Cicely. This is specific to you.
Okay, so I feel like people should be wearing masks, and I'm seeing a lot of people that are not doing that. And that's the problem, because how are things ever going to get better if nobody is following the rules? And that's really the only thing I could think about. Making me happy, I okay, so my school, we're doing virtual and in the building, but I'm only doing virtual. And I feel like they're pretty much trying to want everybody to go back to school. And I think that they're doing a good job as far as like making sure everybody is like wearing masks and all of that. They're doing good in that aspect. So that's the only thing. Oh, and my classmates were very helpful. Like, we're helping each other. And that's something I definitely like, because it's very hard for everybody. So having classmates that like can help you and be there for you, that's good.
I'm Hispanic, and I know that at least in my community, a lot of people of Hispanic descent have lost their jobs, because most of the jobs that they work in are like restaurants or like hotels, and the hours are going down. So that's sort of big, at least in where I live in Barnstable, which is a concern, just because college like tuition, room and board keeps going up. And then something that like sort of makes me happy, because I work at a local supermarket where I live, is you can see that there is concern for the elderly. And so many people come in, they're like, oh, I have 2 orders. One's for me, one's I'm paying for my neighbor who I'm going to bring after, and things like that. So it's nice to see that people are really taking care of one another in the community.
Yeah, and I would say for me personally, so I'm in a sorority, and I'm in one of the D9 sororities, so I'm a Delta. And just seeing the amount of information that is pouring out into the Black community is really good and really encouraging to just get information out, providing educational workshops for the community so that folks just know what's going on. If they need money, how do they get that? If they need access to something, how do they get that? They need access to the vaccine. How can we help them to get access to those resources? So that's been really encouraging for me as a Black woman, just to see my community. And I'm also involved in my church. So just to see the church community kind of rallying, especially, during the summer with all the protests that were going on, just rallying and really being a support. And I think what Sean was saying, just there's more, it almost feels like there's a little bit more of community, even though we're separated, people calling and checking in on each other, making sure folks are okay. That's been really encouraging.
So now this is more in the grand scheme of financial, the finance decision when making these college decisions. So in relation, since due to COVID, it has required a lot of people to go to this hybrid model and have these online classes, there are discrepancy in prices because you can actually get a lower cost. at certain local institute community colleges, for example, especially if you're looking for that first year college experience, but you know that that option isn't there at the ideal school that you want. But I'm curious to know, from your perspectives, how has the financial piece added more into your college decisions now than it has in the past? Like the willingness to take on certain debt to go to your dream school, for instance, has that now been altered because of the new ways that the college experience has been adjusted, and may ultimately be adjusted for forever, because they see how effective this hybrid model can be?
So it definitely has, like, the colleges I wanted to go to before, very expensive and stuff like that. And then after all of this stuff happened with the pandemic, I've definitely changed which colleges I wanted to go to based on the prices, for sure. Because I feel like if I'm not getting, before it was okay because I'm like, this is pre-pandemic, so I'm getting the full experience and all of that. But now I know that I'm going to have like certain restrictions. I'm not going to be able to do certain things. So it's like, do I really want to pay all this money to not really have the experience I want to have?
For me, 100%. I mean, I live 10 minutes from a community college, so that's always an option for me. But seeing how costly education can be with less of the benefits that were pre-pandemic, and seeing how colleges have reacted to the pandemic itself right now, it sort of makes sense to go to maybe community college, wait it out for 2 years, obtain those like starting out classes that you can get at your dream college, at your local community college, and then transfer out to those colleges. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same, along the same lines. One alarming trend that I'm seeing, and in the counseling community that we're seeing, is that there are a handful of colleges that are really pushing the deposit early. So, and I understand the pressure on at the higher ed side that you need to secure your class. But, I fear for the students who don't have access to their counselor. So I work at a private school, and my kids, they have my cell phone number, so they could call me if they needed to call me. But that's not the case for every high school. So I just think about the student who doesn't know or doesn't have access or feels the pressure. Like, I got in and this school is telling me I need a deposit, and I need a deposit today. And it's not even May 1st. So I've been telling my students, just hang out. You have till May 1st. Don't worry about it. They're not going to take your decision back. But the alarming trend that we've been seeing in the counseling community is that there are some colleges that are withholding the financial aid award until they actually deposit. And that's really scary to me, that they're saying, send your non-refundable $500 deposit today, and then we'll give you access to your financial aid. Yikes. It just seems really unethical in a time like this. So that's one of the biggest pieces that I'm seeing as far as some of the concerns, is that families are feeling this pressure to, I need to secure my space, and not really understanding what their rights are. And then, because so many schools are not even in person, there are high school students that aren't even accessing or have access to their school counselor to just find out, what should I do? They're just sending in money, hoping everything works out. And then, if it doesn't work out, they're out $500 during a pandemic. So I think that's pretty concerning. I've seen a definite increase in my students applying for scholarships too. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, those decisions typically come out in about around May. So, but more so than any other year. So.
That is very alarming to hear. I had no idea that was going on. I do want to give all three of you the opportunity. Is there any particular topic, concept, or flaw that you would like to shine the spotlight on in relation to? It could be within the higher ed system that you feel like should be addressed, or a spotlight should be shown more, or even for the two high school students, you can also express like the things that you see that is kind of flawed that you think would need to be improved in case, God forbid, we ever have a situation like this again, that you think should also have the spotlight shown on.
I'll go first while they're thinking. I would say I've also noticed an increase in a lot of admission offices at colleges creating counselor advisory boards. So they're bringing in school counselors to kind of just help them and run some ideas by. Here's what we're thinking. I think that's a great direction to go in. Again, just going back to the earlier presentation with colleges saying this is a great thing, and then you have folks on the high school side say that's a horrible, it's a horrible decision because of what we're hearing. But if they're not communicating in that way or getting that information from the folks that have boots on the ground working with families every single day, it would be hard, right? You're kind of looking within your bubble and in your community and saying this worked for our students, our college students. But it may not work for incoming students. So I think, colleges are probably, they may, see a hit, if they're not providing, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, but if they're not providing the service that, prospective families want them to provide, then like Sean said, like, hey, maybe I'll just go to community college, save some money. It's a very smart move. And then I'll kind of see what happens in a few years. Colleges, their enrollment numbers are going to start to suffer if they don't try to figure out some kind of way to find some middle ground here.
I thought that maybe like it's a good thing that I got reiterated with the pandemic, but the sanitation itself, like it's sad that I had to take a pandemic to have like hand sanitizer at every entrance and having hand wipes or having things cleaned down, because it should just be a necessity to begin with, and just the pandemic reiterated that once again.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Pre-pandemic, I think it's crazy. Like now, I think it's crazy how before things weren't getting wiped down, we didn't have hand sanitizer, all of that. And now we do. And I don't plan on ever like changing the way I'm, doing things now.
All right, so that concludes my questions for you guys. I appreciate you all making the time to answer that and taking time out of your schedule to do it. But I do want to give the opportunity for the MASPER members in the audience, if you have any questions for our college speakers as well as our high school participants, now please feel free to cam up and ask the question. We have more than enough time to get to a lot of questions. So if there's any questions that anyone has, please take the time to ask them now.
I have a question for the college age students. So Beyonce, you made a point earlier today, which I love your point you made about having to be a spokesperson in your classroom for people of color when it comes to any racial tragedy. Sad to say and very honest to say, it's not always going to be just in higher ed. It could be at your job, your school, your neighborhood, whatever. It can happen that way free because you are a person of color who represents possibly a gender or an ethnicity. Sad thing is, what would you want people to know that we need to feel or hear before an issue comes up again over and over again? As we have it happen in our society now, almost every other week or so, there being a racial related, crime or other things that happen to people of color or marginalized communities in general. What do you want people who don't look like you to know beforehand, before we have to go and look at the student of color or the woman in the room or the LGBTQ community member to speak on their own behalf, or that population for them to speak out on automatically? What should they know beforehand?
For me, it's kind of that I'm not just the kind of exotic person. I'm also human. That I'm not just this like kind of special thing that you need to feel sorry for. I get a lot of like, oh, I'm so sorry for you kind of responses, and that kind of, it like always takes me back. So just none of that. And I know from like my peers also here at Emerson, hearing that kind of angers us, and it makes us like to think like, wow, you have the privilege to say I'm so sorry for you. Just to check your privilege a lot, because in my school, a lot of students, they don't do that, and they just say like things that are out of line that they mean well by, but don't come off as such.
Thank you. Very well said. I appreciate hearing that for sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, everybody, this is Stephanie Wells from MIFA. I do have a question for Cicely, but I do want to just thank all the panelists, especially all, the young students, college and high school students. You're just so proud of all the things you've said today and have taken a lot away from your comments and feel hopeful for the future. But I did have a question. Sorry, I just muted myself. For Cicely, so I don't know if everybody heard the rest of my comments, but I'm very concerned about your comment about colleges pushing deposits, without calling out any specific schools.
Yeah.
And right now we're in the process of helping families through this after the college acceptance process.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if you have anything additional to add, but I'm probably going to be calling you to see if you can write a blog that we can get out to families and school counselors, because it's very alarming.
Yeah, so I'm on social media, I'm on several counselor pages and people are always posting, hey, is anyone else seeing this? I'm getting students that are, saying their college. Every year I see colleges that will really push the deposit early. It is a refundable deposit, but they don't, it's still the language that is written in the secure your space today, and so the kids are like, oh my gosh, I have to deposit. And then sometimes students will do it and then they'll come and say, oh, I sent my deposit. I'm like, no. You need to see all of your packages. You need to make sure you're making a well-informed decision. But this is the first time I'm seeing a college say, we're not even going to give you your financial aid award until it's almost like send your deposit in and then we'll give you access. They're not saying we're not going to give you access, but that's what they're saying. So it is freaking students out a little bit. It's pretty alarming. And again, I think it's like I'm a member of NACAC, and with the whole SPGP, which was their ethics code, that has been on a hiatus for right now. So I think it's they call it the Wild West. Colleges can sort of do what they want. And it's a little alarming. There are a lot of colleges, don't get me wrong, I'd say probably 99% of the colleges are operating ethically, but there are still students out there that are pretty vulnerable and they just don't have access to, solid counseling and advice. Their teachers aren't available because they're going through something, they're hybrid or online and they're dealing with their families, or their school counselor isn't available. So how do we educate families on what their rights are when it comes to financial aid? I think they're feeling pretty stuck. We have to make this decision. We have to make it now, not understanding they have time. So I definitely would be willing to chat with you offline, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any more questions?
So for Michaela and Dustin, being from Massachusetts and going out of state to go back to school, how was that for you to make that choice and returning back to campus as you once knew prior to the pandemic, and then going back during a pandemic?
For me, so you're asking how did we make that decision to go back during a pandemic to school?
Was it a struggle for you to go back to campus with the pandemic being in place before, when you were in before the pandemic happened?
So for me, both ways was before, when the pandemic first started and coming back during the pandemic was really hard for me. Neither one of my parents could come down and help me move my stuff into a storage unit to go home. My dad lives in Georgia and he works every day full time, so he couldn't take that time off to just come down. So I had to kind of essentially, my mom asked for help and stuff like that to see if they could help me get in, get my stuff into a storage unit fast paced. But then coming back, it was kind of a struggle for me because not both of my parents, but my mom was like, maybe I think you should stay home. But I knew for myself that I couldn't do the virtual learning. like I just couldn't. I was like, if I stay virtual, I don't think I could pass the classes that I need to pass. But making that decision, I had to move back here by myself again. And I don't have anybody to help me. So I had to kind of figure out ways to get back on campus. And I know that it was a good like a good option for me, but it was kind of a struggle trying to get to that point because I was afraid, like, what if, the city closes down again, or what if it gets worse? So I always had that thought in the back of my mind.
Yeah, so because this is my first time moving on campus last fall, and my dad couldn't come with me because we couldn't afford for him to take off of work. But my mom came with me. Um, Thankfully, because the university gave us a 2-week window that we could find a time to move in, because you could only move in during a certain window because they can only let a certain amount of outside people onto the campus. And so we were able to schedule it on a weekend when my mom wouldn't have work. And so we were able to get around it through there. So that was the moving on campus part. But there was another part of like my willingness to even be around so many colleges, my mom's willingness to let her first child go to not even to like a new city, but there's a pandemic, like she can't be there to protect me. And that was another conversation. And I think my university did a lot of town halling with the parents to comfort them. They put a lot of policies in place where everyone has a single if you live on campus. No one shares a room ever. We had like increased bathroom cleanings, and constant testing. We are all going to be offered the vaccine. I'm going to get mine in Massachusetts just because it's faster. But everyone will have the vaccine by the end of the school year. So they were like, they did a lot of town halling to like to ease the fear that may be there, but the fear was still there. There was a lot of conversation. You can't go out. If you don't need to go out, don't go out. If you can order, if you can do Instacart to get your groceries, Instacart instead of going to the store. There was lots of conversations about any way to alleviate contractions at all. That was like an additional conversation that I had to have with one being a Black man in Chicago. That was one conversation that I had to, but then also there being a pandemic in Chicago, that was another conversation. So I think with moving on, it was just some more conversations that need to be had and more understandings of where we are. So for me to move on to campus.
I do want to like also include that my school also implicated like the single room thing, but we didn't have enough housing on campus, so like they ended up partnering up with a hotel downtown. So I actually live in a hotel by myself, like in a room by myself, but one side of the hotel was actually all Xavier students, and then the other side, the main side part of it is Xavier students and guests. One of the main problems that happened was Lake Charles. There was a hurricane and Lake Charles got hit really badly. And a lot of them had ended up coming into New Orleans, and a lot of them were here in the hotel. And my mom was really worried. And I got a little bit worried too, because they didn't care that much for, the mask or understanding that they're students and we're going to campus. So my safety and my safety for my health and my well-being was in question. And I was very like, how long are they going to stay here? Like, this is like essentially where I live. I come here and I live here. It's not like I'm on campus, we have, the police. We do have the police, but we have random people, who are essentially kind of homeless, and if you don't know, like sometimes when a hurricane hits, some homeless people do trickle in to, these, evacuation areas, and that's what happened. So for like, I think 2 months, that's how my living situation was. And my mom was really like scared, and I was a little bit scared because I'm really cautious when it comes to me like being around people and COVID, because my mom has an autoimmune disease and I can't really get into contact with people or get sick and then come home and then give it to her, because then she'll be sick and then I'll feel bad. So that was another like issue that I also had to consider especially when I was thinking about coming back here too.
I have a question I think anyone can really answer. It seems like, you guys have a lot that you are navigating. So I was just wondering, how do you stay motivated? I mean, I've been out of college for 4 years and I can't imagine, navigating the challenges that you guys are currently navigating. So what are some ways that you try to stay motivated and encouraged and all that stuff?
I can go. For me, it's mainly about remembering my end goal and like where I want to end up in life, and like how, despite how everything is hard now with COVID, that the places that I want to go and the kind of person and career that I want to have. And I know that like just keeping my work ethic up and just reminding myself just basically my goal. That's what keeps me motivated.
I think for me, it's me doing like weekly calls with my mom because I get really homesick. So I'm here and I really, there's really not much to do. So like I'm kind of stuck in my room and I kind of lose motivation. But when I call my mom, she helps me like kind of recenter myself. And, I also have like my friend group too, we all try to support each other. We're all like dealing with the same thing. So if we can all support each other and all motivate each other, to what the big end goal is, I think that's what helped me to try to get through the semester.
I think for me, specifically winter quarter, which is we have a 3-quarter system, was extremely rough. One, because Chicago is extremely cold and dark, and so that seasonal effect was, I didn't think I was going to be affected that much, but it hit hard. Not having sun, only having sun for like 2 or 3 hours a day. And so being cognizant of that and the changes there, but then I think something that I'm happy that our university supported was having a close contact group and having people who they wanted us to take our mask off with and be in close contact with to help, to positively help the spread of the virus, and having that immunity threshold there and getting over that. And so having people who I was able to take my mask off with, have dinner with on Sundays, or our university tried to do little things like we have three museums on campus, so they open up 2 of the museums so we can go and see. One of them is the Dusambo Museum of African American History. They opened that up, and so having those small little outside of school experiences and realizing, hey, I don't have to sit in my room and look at calculus equations for 12 hours is like a thing that I can do, and realize my life it's not all about school. Like it will eventually be better someday.
I think just one thing, it's not really a question, but more of a comment. If, since there are colleges on here, colleges could just be, I think maybe mindful for students who are graduating this year and students who graduated last year, that they lost out on a lot of firsts, right? So no proms, graduations, things that I think as adults we take, we take for granted. And even just talking to my students, I've gone through life, I've gone to college and grad school and everything. And I'm like, no, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But like for students that are teenagers or, early 20s, they don't have any prior experience. So this is it's really hard. And I think, students are coming in really sad. They're really sad. And we've been in person. My school, we've been in person since August. And even with that, my students are sad. So I think just, for colleges to understand, we've been trying to rack our brains about how are we going to end our, this year's senior year well and give them some memories. So, I mean, that's just probably part of the college experience. If colleges could just be mindful of that, to try to create something that could be memorable, because it's crazy.
I'd like to extend on your comment. So like for my school, I lost my first Spring Fest, which is like our homecoming during the springtime. But this year, my school actually approved us to have one. So mine's is next week. I'm actually one of the event chairs for our Spring Fest. And one of the questions I asked when I had my interview, when they asked me, did I have any questions, was how are you going to make it so that we're not, it's still COVID restrictions, but we're also having a good time? Because a lot of time, during my first year as a freshman, we had homecoming, we had events all the time. We don't have that anymore. I know we have some, but they're not as like often. So, our social dynamic went down. And one of the things they said was like, this is why we want students to actually be able to put these events on, advocate, because we want to know what you guys have been dealing with. So I know for my school, they're trying to make an effort and try to keep the social aspect, but I don't know for all other schools, but I know for my school, they have.
I'll take off my moderator hat for a moment and just kind of ask a general question for everyone, because I'm curious. I'm as someone who has caught COVID, thought that COVID was about to take them out. 3 kids, wife, transitioning jobs in between COVID. I'm curious to know how other people may have, like, what has been your go-to to try to keep some type of mental sanity? Like, what have you turned to kind of keep yourself sane, keep yourself entertained, and did it to prevent depression? Because I'm sure COVID depression, we will probably see news articles on that in the years to come. So I'm just curious to know what everyone has done to kind of keep themselves balanced.
I, for one, have come across a number of YouTube channels or podcasts over the past year, and you listen to them while you're just working, while you're doing dishes, while you're cooking. One of the YouTube channels I found is this individual who cooks. And when I first started watching his videos, I wasn't sure if he was a real cook or he was just messing around at his house. Come to find out, he is a cook. He has like 3 restaurants. And so, and he sells like a cooking knife and a couple of knives. I got one for Father's Day, although because of the pandemic, it came like 3 months after. And I've been buying way more ingredients, more vegetables, more things to try to cook and figure that out. And not that I couldn't cook before, but I'm just, experimenting more, which is fun. I still watch his videos Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. After work, I put them on. But finding things that I like to do, just something to escape in a sense. And more recently, I'm a big, huge Marvel fan. So more recently, I've just been really enjoying Disney Plus. So I look forward to that. Just the little things go a long way.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dustin.
No, I was just gonna say something that I've been doing, which I really did not appreciate before, is that I live in a beautiful city, both in Boston and Chicago, and I have not been taking advantage of it at all. More so in Chicago, there's the lake, and luckily my university is very close to the lake, so I can walk around the lake. It's a very safe, COVID safe thing. Just walking, biking. And in Boston, Boston's a very bikeable city, so biking, sitting at the pond, going to the beach and just sitting there. Like, I have a privilege of being near a beach and a city. Like, that's something that like other major cities don't necessarily have. So taking advantage of the nature that I have been maybe too busy before to appreciate.
Yeah, I was just going to say scheduling in, actually scheduling in time, a break. I think, this whole virtual environment, because we were virtual from March to, the end of the school year. And I worked. I mean, I think I was working till like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, this is crazy. I need to turn this computer off. But I say whenever I always tell people, like, get outside, the sun's out, just go out for even if it's 10 minutes. I think sometimes we can just get so captured by our computer screen and like, okay, I'll go out later. That your work is always going to be there. So take a break. It's really important.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think for me, we've been working from home for, feels like a year now. I think it's been a year. And, I think when you work from home, it's easy to have work and home blend together. You don't know what's work and what's home and what's the difference. So for me, I've been trying to, create that balance and saying, you know what, I can do this thing tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. I don't have to feel like I have to get it done if there's space enough to do it the next day. And I think giving yourself grace is something I've learned is, we are only one person and we only have, 24 hours in a day, and we're not going to be able to do everything that we want to get done, and learning that there's tomorrow that we can look forward to get those things that we want to get done. We can do it.
Yeah, everyone is right. I think that we all are on the same page. I think I was in denial at first that we were going to be home for this long. At first, we all got the heads up to be home possibly for about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe, but then now it's been a full year. But taking care of your own mental health and your sanity, like you mentioned, Asia, are you at home? Are you at work? Are you in your committee? Where are you at? You're all at one time. So having a chance to go outside and get some fresh air, go out for a walk, take a bike ride, get out of your in-home work life space for a minute and get away, because it can be depressing, it can be frustrating, it can be sad when all your worlds combine into one all of a sudden. So I think you guys had a really good idea about making sure you find a way to get out of your own head and out of your own space just for a little bit every day, once a while, once a week, whatever. Just get out of your own space, out of your head.
Definitely. I would recommend, I started doing meditation last March. Well, I started doing it a little bit before, and when COVID first hit, I literally had to do it every day at the end of the day just to, kind of reset myself. And it just helped with calming and stress, and it just worked wonders for me. So I'd highly recommend it. And I started taking a lunch break, which I never did very often when I was in the office. So now I take a lunch break and take the dog for a walk, and I just need to get away from my computer for a bit.
One thing I did was I invested in my health. So I started figuring out a workout plan that I can do after school or during the day or in the morning. So just kind of realign myself and know that I'm investing in myself. And another thing is, I'm far away from my friends, or, when COVID first started, we didn't see much of each other. So we would do Zoom calls and watch movies on Zoom. And it was us sitting in the movie theater together. And we still do it, we do Disney Plus, and you just figure out ways to kind of just reconnect. So you're not just on the phone with someone, you're actually enjoying time with them, but you're not with them.
Okay, so since we have 5 minutes left, I definitely want to take the time to thank everyone for coming. And I also want to make sure that I give my team some love, because I could not have put together this panel without their support and help. Starting with my co-chair, Tanika. She's been great. I don't need to tell you how much great you are, because you're already gonna get an ego inflated more than it already is. Asia Stupar from MIFA, thank you for being able to help bring the panelists in. Kelly Lasher for creating the flyer. Jody Conway for being able to bring another panelist in. Erica Davis. She was a latecomer into the committee, but she already had made her contribution felt. All the discussion that was generated from our questions and panels. Tatiana Ramos, another one of my Northeastern people. Let me make sure I don't forget anyone because I don't want y'all mad at me. Romana, who I recruited personally to make sure that I got her, even though she wasn't in financial aid. Thank you, Romana. And I definitely want to make sure I shout out Mika, even though she couldn't be here. It was originally her conversation topic that led to this panel. So I'm very thankful to have her here. And let me look at my list to make sure that I didn't forget nobody, because there's a lot of people and my memory is not the greatest anymore.
Did you get Asia?
I got Asia. I got
Yeah,
Asia.
sure. Just making
I
sure.
got
Okay.
Asia.
Thank you.
Oh, Sarah. Sarah, I did not, I'm not gonna let you go unnoticed. I know you had also made the attempts to get people in. I did not forget you. I have to make sure that I hit all my people. So thank you, all of you, for your time and your help and your consideration. Thank you to all the panelists for agreeing to be a part of this. I am very thankful that you all took the time out of your schedules to do this, because without you all, this would not have been as successful as it is. And I want to thank everyone who took the time to register, whether you had to renew your master membership just to get the registration link. I appreciate you for taking the time to do that. We will send out a survey so you can reflect on the event, tell us what you like, you can tell us what you didn't like, even though I'm sure there's nothing there. But I just want to thank you all once again, and I'll say have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Jerron. Great job.
Thank you, guys. Good job.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
weekend.